Looking ahead, what's next for the industry? It's clear that success in asset-based lending requires more than just execution, right? It takes foresight, adaptability, and true commitment to doing things the right way. Welcome to ACS's Portfolio Perspective. I'm Andrew Pace, ACS's Chief Client Experience Officer and your host. Today, for our inaugural podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague, friend, and boss, Brian Noble, co-founder and CEO of Asset Compliance Solutions. Brian is a pioneer who spent more than 25 years revolutionizing how lenders handle collections and recovery. Under Brian's leadership, ACS has achieved a host of industry firsts, the first to introduce client account access technology, and the first to earn SOC2 certification. Setting new standards for security and compliance are just a couple of examples. Today, Brian continues to be the visionary driving the innovation needed to keep pace with a rapidly changing marketplace. Remarkably, ACS's first client from 1998, a major equipment manufacturer, still partners with us today, which is a testament to Brian's approach to client relationships and business results. Brian, welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you for the warm welcome.
You're welcome. Let's start with our first topic, culture as a competitive advantage. ACS is known for its strong culture of compliance, but I'd like to dig into how that culture creates real market differentiation. Can you talk about how that foundation of compliance sets ACS apart in the industry?
Great question, and I'd love to share on that point. I think for us at ACS and me personally, being able to assemble really some of the top talent and utilizing their strengths, not just from a perspective of, being the best, but it's really about alignment within the organization, collaboration, and really just long-standing leaning on each other. And I think when you create that environment, the outcomes and the positive things that are attributed to it are amazing.
And from there, I'd love to hear some specific examples. How has the culture translated into better outcomes for clients or given ACS an edge in situations where culture really mattered?
The one thing that comes to mind, Andrew, is, we were giving it an opportunity to solve a really difficult scenario, something that may have been a little bit out of our wheelhouse per se, but nonetheless, we took on the challenge to satisfy a great partner, longstanding partner. And I just watched our team come together as a group and approach this scenario or account that was given to us and really just dig in, think outside the box, and really just created a win-win for everybody in this scenario that I don't even think the partner or client had ever seen. So those are the kinds of things when you have culture and collaboration and people working together, again, the outcomes are just amazing.
That's great. That's great. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about a topic that's been top of mind for a lot of people in the industry: the impacts of economic uncertainty in the asset-based lending space. To start, how are interest rate fluctuations and inflation currently affecting both lenders and borrowers?
I think from where we sit and what we see, it's kind of a moving target. And when I say that, interest rate fluctuations certainly impact lending and credit decisions and all those sorts of things. But by the same token, the current customers that are impacted and their ability to, pay, impacts on their payment, going up and things like that. Just constantly, it's a never-ending cycle, if you will. So we see shifts, ebbs and flows, and delinquencies. And in speaking with customers, some of their challenges related to these interest rates are kind of a common statement.
Right. And what would you say are some of the strategies you're seeing lenders adopt to navigate this kind of economic volatility?
It's interesting. So if you roll back, the calendar to kind of the COVID days, there were a lot of customers or clients that were, utilizing modifications and extensions and working with people during challenge times. Um, I believe that, in this environment, let's call it 2023 and to present, those types of tools or modifications aren't as prevalent. Um, but I still believe, that if somebody is willing to make a commitment to pay and trying to do the right thing, there is ability to work and get those type of, implementations.
Seen lenders, you know, try to engage service providers sooner in the process to try to mitigate some losses in portfolios?
So we have seen definitely an uptick or an openness to, you know, take on or address that type of approach. Um, I think from where we sit and what we've experienced, that strategy, if you will, really makes a lot of sense. And again, the sooner that you can make a decision that something is not going the proper way, the better the outcome could be on the back end.
No, it's great. And finally, on this topic, when markets are unpredictable, how does that change the way you think about risk management, both from a portfolio and individual borrower perspective?
So I would say that the volatility and the uncertainty; those are two kind of key words. I think they really play through the whole lending, portfolio management, customer acquisition, buyer experience. It's really because it's so unpredictable and the clarity isn't there. I think the more that the communication lines of communication can be manifested all the way through from customer, lender, servicer. If everybody is on the same page through these challenging and uncertainty times, I think the outcomes are much more productive and positive.
Right. I would agree. Communication is key. I think a lot of times I think most customers would find themselves in a better scenario if they were just communicating with the lender. Oftentimes, their lenders will send accounts over to their service providers because the borrower just stopped communicating, and obviously that presents a big challenge. Let's talk about something we've all seen firsthand: the evolution in client expectations. As clients' needs continue to shift, how has ACS been able to adapt its staffing and professional development to stay ahead?
Great question. So those two things that you mentioned have always been on the forefront, of our um, ability and our ability to get further and deeper and knowledgeable. The industry is always changing. Um, and I think, our leadership team has always been about professional development, taking advantage of new insights, industry trends, and just, keeping abreast of that. So again, it's always been a forefront of ours to maintain those things and, be in the know, so to speak.
Right. And we've touched on compliance earlier, but I'd love to hear more about the rising compliance standards, especially things like SOC2 certification, which are shaping how clients evaluate their service providers. On the tech side, what kind of technology or innovation initiatives have ACS prioritized to meet these challenging expectations?
So another great question. And I think, as everyone knows, the biggest thing when we talk about risk management as it relates to compliance and things like that, information sharing, we have always embraced the technology platform as it ties into compliance. And, we've spent a great deal of time researching the right resources to help us, be at the highest level when it comes to compliance and risk. And I think that, any company that's going to be in this space as a service provider, has to say to themselves, the technology component where information is being exchanged back and forth, sensitive data sets, um, really has to, take that as an understanding, not only just as a service provider, but, anybody operating in the lending space.
Right. And can you share any concrete results that may have come out of these efforts, ideally with a few specific examples?
So, I think um, from ACS's perspective, SOC2 was a term that we had been introduced to and learned about, I don't know, 10 years ago. And, because we've had somebody dedicated as a CIO position, really said we've got to incorporate this into our platform. Um, and in doing so, there is some moving parts that, people have to engage and embrace within the organization. So that takes a little time to get everybody on board. Um, but once you get everybody rowing in the right direction, to answer your question, I think the outcomes, of this SOC 2 report and where it gets you to the next level are apparent. And we've had some great results. The reports that come back on an annual basis where we might have gaps or things that need to be addressed or flushed out. So we feel very confident and um, I guess as a kind of a thought leader in that space to utilize that platform and that compliance standard.
Do you think have you heard that clients are embracing that more and more these days, and really leaning on service providers to be SOC 2 compliant, to ensure that their information and their customers' information is secure within their vendors' network and systems?
So I would say, it's a 50-50 split. There are several clients that, really mandate and almost, require that you are in this um, environment in order to be a partner. And then there are others that, and I question at times, I don't want to use the word overlook, but are a little less lenient or a little less stringent on those types of certifications. So I think it's a moving target, and as time goes on and people get more familiar, I believe that SOC 2 certification will become a kind of a standard.
It certainly, I think, raises the bar from a service provider perspective. Obviously, it demonstrates, because it's a big investment, right, Brian?
Absolutely. These are the things that when you talk about an investment, ROI, and really wanting to be that professional delivery service, so to speak. Just taking those things in account into your budget and making sure that you are that company. I think speaks volumes.
And that's just not a one time investment, right?
Absolutely not. It's an ongoing annual type of report. So I think once you start, um, you have to maintain and give the understanding that this is going to be part of your world going forward.
To wrap up, let's take a look ahead and talk about the future outlook, both for ACS and the asset based lending industry as a whole. What are some of the key trends you think listeners should be preparing for right now?
Well, I think everybody is, in the mindset or, trying to get an understanding how, AI is going to apply to, their models and what they're doing. Um, and I think, we as a company have also been, on that path to gain an understanding. But, the concept or the tool itself can really, just bring a lot of enhancement to what we're doing. But I just think technology in general is just speeding up and bringing efficiencies and just gaining data insights that are just really going to be amazing. And we are constantly pushing the data portion of our business and trying to make decisions based on data, because in the end the data is really the historical backbone of what we do.
What about APIs, and how has APIs helped companies that utilize that technology gain an advantage in our space?
So another great question. When you talk about APIs and systems, we at ACS have created a homegrown system, and there's a myriad of systems that different lenders work on. There's probably 4 or 5 that come to the forefront, but trying to gain access or have everybody's different system communicate with yours without the API abilities would just be really, really challenging or cumbersome. So developing and implementing these APIs, although each one is a little different and the scope of work is a little different, the ability or commitment to do that only just enhances the whole outcome customer experience.
And it also, I would say, allows you to become a more of a strategic partner with the lender as well. And again, another big thing that is an investment, and it's something that you have to continue to the APIs evolve. Each client has different data points, so you obviously have the standard template, and then you have to customize it for each client. So there's always, you're always, investing in, IT resources and development to have that, great experience for both the lender and the service provider, right?
Correct. I mean, in a perfect world, if there were one system that everybody operated from, and you could just plug and play from a service provider to a vendor to a customer, wouldn't that be something? But doesn't exist, but there are workarounds, and again, it's all about building efficiencies.
Yeah, that would be nice. It would certainly make it easy for everybody. But we're definitely it's something that does make life a little bit easier, instead of having to have staff. You have to have staff on both sides, data entry, from the client side and from the service provider side as well. So creating those efficiencies, building those APIs can save a lot of time, and avoid some mistakes too, right? I mean, we've seen the human element of entering accounts and things like that, can create some mistakes, right?
Great point. The human touch is, as we all know, can create potential errors, and honestly, in the space we provide, service, errors can be costly. Errors can be, unfortunately, I don't want to call it damaging, but reputation is always top of mind. So we want those mistakes to be minimized, as much as possible.
Right. And looking ahead, what is your vision for where ACS and the broader industry is headed in the next few years?
It's an interesting question. I guess as a visionary, I'll accept that title. But I am always thinking about ways to take what we're doing, leveraging our people, which is our biggest asset, then our technology, and how do we utilize that to service customers in a better way. I love the conversations around not being so transactional and trying to get us more in a end-to-end type of solution. In other words, being able to service an underperforming loan under several facets, from early stage to late stage, and not having to be called in the middle, when some of our abilities can drive results, if we are engaged earlier. So again, I think as we grow as a company and get better understandings of some of the other services we can provide and flush those out and bring that to the table, I think the long-term vision is to really be an end-to-end solutions provider.
And where do you see, what about from the industry perspective? Where do you see where do you see that headed in the next few years?
Another great question. I think as technology again becomes a bigger component of what people are doing, that always plays into it. But there will always be the human touch points of our service component. Outside field agents, inside people that really need to talk to customers as opposed to something on a recorded type of message or a bot. I think still those human touches are always going to be a component of what we do, combined with some technology enhancements.
Great point. Just to maybe expand on that a little bit, about the human side of things. One of the things I think you take a lot of pride in at ACS is, and maybe to touch on something you talked about earlier, maybe from a culture perspective, is the type of people that we look for, or what are things that clients could look for when they're looking to hire talent in the industry. What are some best practices that you might be able to share with some clients on that? Because it seems like more and more clients struggle to attract, retain, and even promote within their organizations.
Yeah, so I think one of the greatest attributes of folks on our team is the ability to a listen, and b empathetic, um, empathetic to the point where they transition that into problem solving. And I think once you can connect with a customer who's facing some challenging times, but can speak to them, on their level with an understanding of what they're going through. And I'll, take it down as even as a little further as understanding the industry that they're in, to make that connectivity. I think once you establish that bond or um, communication line, things start going a lot smoother, and I think you're able to work through and navigate some of the challenges, to provide a better outcome.
Brian, what are some other traits that clients can look for when they're looking to hire within their organization?
So I think what as to our point, people that basically can problem solve and have empathy. I think some really great takeaways are, folks that really become and have an understanding as you're working with outside service providers or third parties, that really what has to happen, or the best scenario is, um, each, let's call it, stakeholder becomes an extension of each other. In other words, if ACS is working or representing a client, they almost want to be speaking that they are one and the same or working within the same organization, and vice versa. If a call or an opportunity were to come into the client side, that we are all working and have an alignment together. I think when you unify that, the outcomes are much more productive.
That's great. And I think, what are your thoughts on, I mean, how important is communication? Would you say that that's another trait that lenders can look for? People that communicate well, articulate. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. We talked about communication, earlier in the discussion, but when you have somebody that's maybe not in a great spot, and sometimes it's just the choice of words, or the tone or the vibe of the conversation, can really just change a scenario that's not going so well, to just a much higher conversation, that leads to better outcomes. So I think it is really key to have that communication and listening component, is really a skill set, when looking for great talent.
That's great. Thank you for elaborating on that point again. Can't stress how important communicating is, especially in this industry. Do you have any questions for me?
I think if I were to ask you, one question, and because you've worn so many hats and seen so many different aspects of what we do, and your tenure is just as long as mine almost. What you see is a long term, or in the next 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you touched on it a little bit earlier. We talked about AI. We're talking right now. I think what's a big buzzword right now is tariffs, and how are tariffs gonna impact the industry. So you got those two big I would say headwinds. And at the end of the day, it's really just adapting to what's happening, being able to pivot, and being that provider that is going to solve the client's problems first. That's something that we always try to strive for, is let's solve problems. I think that's one thing I think we really strive at, is coming up with solutions to not only our clients' problems, but even internally. There's always issues, things come up within the organizations, and being able to be open, have very good open discussions, and I think that's what helps us get those solve those problems for our clients, and even any problems that we have within the organization. So I think those are some of the things that I'm seeing. Obviously, interest rates are a concern. So depending on where we stand with that, and the compliance, the regulations in the industry, in collections, recovery, that's a huge part of our world right now. SOC2 has definitely helped us save some time and become more efficient. It's saved our clients a lot of time. If we're SOC2 compliant, we're avoiding having to answer a lot more questions, and clients appreciate that. So I think just staying on top of industry trends, and where things are headed, I think is really critical and key to not only our success, but the success of our clients as well.
Perfect. 100%.
So any other questions for me?
I think that's all I have for today. But I really enjoyed the discussion, and you forced me to kind of share some things that are probably inside, but you're not always talking about. So I appreciate that.
Anytime. So, just to wrap up, I think, from the strength of ACS's compliance-driven culture to navigating economic uncertainty, evolving with clients' expectations, and looking ahead, what's next for the industry, it's clear that success in asset-based lending requires more than just execution, right? It takes foresight, adaptability, and true commitment to doing things the right way, which is one of our core values at ACS, right? I mean, that's why we do things.
You hit it right on the head. Do the right thing is one of our number one core values, and it's not just a statement that you put up there. It's something that we all live by. We all understand, and you just take a simple statement like that, and you can apply it to so many things. So I am a true and firm believer of the statement, do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we live and breathe here at ACS every minute. A big thank you to Brian Noble for sharing your insights and experience. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, share it with your network, and stay connected for more conversations exploring the trends and strategies shaping the future of lending and recovery. Until next time, take care and be well.
Appreciate your time today, Andrew. Stay well.
Thank you, Brian. You too.